Chris Hayes, give us your take on what we heard from Todd Blanche, who said he didn't know whether or not Donald Trump would testify.
I mean, I think there's a desire to retain some narrative suspense for something that I would be genuinely, truly, gobsmackingly shocked. I mean, it would be, I think, malpractice. And you know, although I wouldn't put malpractice past them. I mean, look, we know what happens in the attorney-client relationship between Donald Trump and his lawyers. This trial has that as its central focus. I mean, and it's not the first one. I mean, look at Rudy Giuliani. Look at two other lawyers who are facing Jeffrey Clark or John Eastman, people who represented the president in some capacity who are facing sanction, disbarment, criminal prosecution. So, you know, I wouldn't, I guess, put it past him, but I do think that there's enough sort of reptilian sense of self-preservation in the lizard brain of the defendant here to understand that testifying would be a disaster.
Quoting one of his former competitors. Ben Carson. Chris Hayes, bring us inside the courtroom, though. I mean, we're relying on this constantly updating document. What does it feel like in there? What does it smell like in there? How's Donald Trump reacting? How are his kids reacting? What's the jury like? Well, give us everything you can.
He has been... Okay, so you want some? So here's some color. I mean, his eyes have been closed most of the morning. Again, I can't say what's happening behind those lids, but his eyes have largely been closed. The jury has been paying careful attention. I think they're particularly paying attention. The prosecution has done a very good job of moving things quickly and also using these exhibits, which sort of allow a place for visual focus, which is helpful. But the most striking tableau to me was the retinue, the two rows in front of me, in which you have Vivek Ramaswamy and Doug Burgum and Byron Donald and another congressman, Boris Epshteyn, Alina Habba, Eric and Lara Trump. There's the individual who works on the staff to compile things to print out to make the defendant feel good about himself. I was actually watching her at work as she was copying and pasting into that document. Presumably is going to be printed out at lunch so it can be handed to him and he can leaf through them at the camera in a few moments. And here I'm sitting watching this and I'm thinking to myself, here are all these people who've allowed themselves, not his family members, they're family members, and not even the staff who work for him, but people like Vivek Ramaswamy or Doug Burgum, who are sort of playing the Michael Cohen role. Like, there's a weird thing happening in that courtroom. There's Michael Cohen there, clearly a diminished man. I mean, if people encountered him, Katie, you remember what Michael Cohen was like in 2017 and 2018, full of bluster, full of confidence, full of sort of intimidation, and now he's up there looking gaunt, looking defeated on the witness stand, and you're watching the next iteration of people auditioning to be the next version of that guy up on the stand, or the next version of Mike Pence, the former vice president, who sure as heck is not in the courtroom to support the man who he served with in the White House after he sicked a mob after him chanting "Hang Mike Pence." So here you have this set of people who seem to bear no connection to some looking at some ghosts of Christmas future of the man on the stand who was himself this sort of supplicant figure who thought that he could generate both revenue, fame, and fortune and power for himself by proximity to Donald Trump, and has ended up on the wrong side of the bargain. And you wonder if anyone sitting in those first two rows is going to end up in the same position.
As you are now, once was I. Chris, I mean, talking about Michael Cohen, again, when he had that office here in 30 Rock after Donald Trump was elected, not at NBC News, but at the Squire Boggs law firm upstairs. I remember visiting him up there. He was special counsel to the president, and it was this highly decorated office. He was showing me all the knickknacks that he had received, all the phone calls that he was getting, talking about these deals that he had made because of the access he now had because he was the lawyer to the president of the United States, a man who was very high on a hill. And you're right to talk about how far he has fallen since then. The Michael Cohen that you see today is not the Michael Cohen you saw a few years ago. The Michael Cohen that flipped against Donald Trump is a different, and as you said, Chris Hayes, diminished man. Now, the motivations behind that, I mean, he talks about wanting to do right by the American public and right by his family. That's kind of neither here nor there. For this case, it's about what he experienced, what he says Donald Trump did and asked him to do, and whether the jury believes it.
That's right, and how credible that story is, and also how corroborated it is. I mean, I have to say that corroboration, to come back to those emails and why I think the constant use of exhibits and text, which is not novel to Michael Cohen's direct, it's part of common trial practice, but in this case is particularly effective because, again, I think because of Michael Cohen's history, because of the fact that he's talking about under oath in this trial is a set of lies he told, because there's a set of documented lies he told. When he says something and we see it in paper, when he says something and see it in paper, I felt Bob Costello, the lawyers reaching out, was being sketchy. I felt like I was being pressured. Then you see an email and you think, that's a pretty sketchy email. That feels like an email from someone who's really pressuring you. He talked about setting up a back channel, and you think, oh, is he saying like back channel in some paraphrasing way? And then you read the email that says, I would be happy to set up a back channel. You're like, oh, okay, so that's actually right on the money. And that they kept doing that time and time again in a way that I think does greatly bolster the credibility of the story he's telling on these main points.
Chris Hayes, thank you so much. And for more from Chris, tune into All In with Chris Hayes tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC.